Between Two Amps is proudly sponsored by Liquid Death. Right now I am enjoying a mango chainsaw.
I got some severed lime. If you don't know, they have some new flavors that have come out recently,
and they're amazing.
They're really good.
Yeah, there's a little bit of agave infused in there.
Yeah.
And so it really makes those flavors pop. I'm actually really stoked on it.
Yeah, it's really good. Murder Your Thirst, by the way. That's what I do daily.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I could possibly get through a podcast without murdering my thirst.
I agree.
I mean, really, I don't think I could riff.
Yeah.
Without murdering my thirst.
I mean,
is there anything that you can think of that you could possibly do without murdering your thirst?
No.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah. I can murder my thirst. Perfect. But I definitely murder a lot of songs.
It was a perfect thirst murder.
Perfect thirst murder. Thank you. Thanks, Liquid Death. Appreciate it.
Thank you to Liquid Death.
And watch our podcast.
Yeah.
I said watch our podcast.
Yeah. Listen to our podcast.
Yeah.
Thanks, and murder your thirst.
Yep.
He was looking for a life that would give him the feeling of being worthwhile.
Welcome to another episode of Between Two Amps. I'm really excited about our guest today. I've been watching him a long time on Premier Guitar's Rig Rundown. Give a warm Between Two Amps welcome to Perry Bean.
Let's roll. I'm excited to do this.
We're getting meta. We're talking about the gear behind the gear rundown. So Perry, thank you so much for joining us, and kind of wanted to start this how we start all of these, like talking about like what was your journey into picking up an instrument and getting into punk and hardcore, like how did all of that go down?
Okay, so a bit of a weird one. When I was a kid, my dad is a mechanic. He's a master mechanic in New York, where I grew up. He had a shop, and I was always in trouble. So like after school, I had to go clean up the shop, sweep it up, clean the impound yard and stuff like that. Well, fortunately for me, unfortunately for some hardcore kid that was older than me, he fucking totaled his car, and I was cleaning out the impound yard, and I stole all his tapes, and it was like SSD Control, Earth Crisis, Madball, like all this
shit.
Cool,
oh
yeah, Misfits, Legacy of Brutality, So I got, and this was when I was like maybe 12. So I got really kind of thrust in, like, I'm like, at the time I had heard, Pantera and stuff, and I'm like, that's cool. But when I heard hardcore, it was like, okay, that's fucking cool. Like, this is what's up, So that's when I kind of fell in love with, punk rock and hardcore. And so when I was growing, so oddly enough, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this band, but there's this really shitty 80s hair metal band called Manowar.
Oh yeah. Oh, what?
Okay.
I don't know.
What? Are you familiar with Manowar?
Well, not everybody knows.
Brothers of Metal? Metal
Totally.
Real?
Yeah, man. So Carl Logan, their guitarist, was my guitar teacher growing up.
What?
Yeah. So that's how I got into metal, because I had already loved hardcore, and metal was a little theatrical for me. And at the time, it was like King Diamond and shit that it was like a little lame and face painting and stuff. Cradle of Filth, it was big at the time and stuff, and it was like, I don't know if I really love that, but the way that they play guitar is right on, because just as I was really falling in love with hardcore and guitar, metallic hardcore was huge, man. I'm from Syracuse, Earth Crisis, All Out War, Buried Alive, like all these bands were like, I was seeing them every weekend because it is what it is. Yeah.
Dude, I actually, so on the Cradle of Filth tip, like there was like a hot second where like, Cruelty and the Beast came out, and I was like, this kind of slaps, and like but then I don't think I ever listened to anything after that. You know, like it just like it would come across like a feed somewhere. I'd click on, I'd be like, oh yeah, they're still there. Okay, cool. But they did the Cruelty and the Beast like full album tour a couple months back, and I ended up scoring a ticket to it. I was just like, yeah, I'll go. And I was like, they're fucking good. Like, I was just
so solid.
The band that they have right now was incredible, and they played the album start to finish, and they did the Iron Maiden cover, and was just like, I was just like, this is like, I was back in, I guess it was college at the time, just to date myself, but I was like, oh yeah, no, this still slaps.
So good. You know, it's funny how much of it crosses over, especially with the Gothenburg scene, because I feel like, man, you know, at the Gates and In Flames and all those bands really kind of, even if they had never heard hardcore, they were kind of on to something. But I think once they were introduced to hardcore and realized that breakdowns and metal are a perfect marriage, it was like off to the races, man. You know what I mean? And then you bands like Soilwork and, you know, stuff like that. Here's another funny one for you. So, you know, after taking lessons from the Manowar guy, I became like really obsessed with the Gothenburg sound, you know. I even went to fucking Sweden, you know, like, because I was like, okay, I love this music. I want to go see what it's about. And it was interesting while I was there because it was like on the radio would be like Meshuggah and then Britney Spears. And then
weird.
Like, it was so weird, you know, like super strange. But so I got really, really, really into like neoclassical, you know, sweet picking and all that shit. And then so Soilwork was like one of my all-time favorite more metal bands, because they, you know, like especially Chain Heart Machine early records are like not only thrashy as shit, but they have wicked breakdowns, you know. So I became obsessed with In Flames and, you know, those bands. Well, Peter Wickers from Soilwork, who's the guitar player that kind of wrote all the good shit, by total fucking chance, I'm living in Nashville years later, and I'm in line for coffee, and I'm like, this dude looks fucking familiar, you know? It's Peter Wickers from Soilwork, and I'm like, listen, motherfucker, you are giving me guitar lessons. And he's like, but I, you know, I don't teach guitar now.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I think I might have scared him a little bit, because I was like, nah, dude, you're fucking coming over to my house and you're teaching me lessons.
He's like, who are you? Wait,
okay.
what?
Yeah, I had no idea. And it's funny because now I see him at NAMM and shit, because he works for Fender, you know, like Jackson Guitar. So it's like, yeah, he's such a good dude.
Oh my god, it's so funny, like how much like those bands like crossed. They were like kind of a modern day like you know, Motorhead, where it's just like punks, hardcore kids, metalhead, like we're all like into like At the Gates, like just like when they the last time I saw, or I guess the first time I saw At the Gates, I missed I started going to shows like a month or two after the Napalm Death At the Gates tour came through, like on Slaughter of the Soul.
It was like 94 or something.
Yeah, somewhere. Yeah. And so the first time I saw him was at the Fonda here in Los Angeles, and they came out and played Blinded by Fear, and I was standing on the side of the stage, and they had a barricade, and it just all of a sudden it's like a 3 to 4 high wave of finger points coming across the barricade, singing along. I was just like, this is like, it was like goosebumps, like, because it sounded amazing.
Was that on the Converge tour? Was Converge touring at that time?
That was the one after that.
Oh, okay.
This one,
you know.
Yeah, it was At the Gates, Darkest Hour, and Municipal Waste was.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, that whole scene, like, kind of. I mean, everyone I talked to, everyone I played with, was all into those bands, and I never really got into them. It's not that like I like didn't like them. I just didn't listen to them until like probably like honestly like 4 years ago, and I was like, I'm gonna check this band out. I was like, holy shit! Oh my god!
Dude, Slaughter the Soul is like one of the most iconic. It's crazy. If it came out fucking today, people would be like, "What is this? This is awesome."
Yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. Like everybody, I was talking to somebody, and they're like, "Wait, you haven't heard Slaughter?" I'm like, "No." Everyone's like, "That record is like iconic across like underground and heavy music, right?" And I was like, "Oh, I'll check it out." And I was like, "Holy shit! Start to finish, this thing is just relentless." You know,
in a weird way, people don't ever make this connection. But for me, it's so obvious. I think it's because I was into that Scandinavian metal really young. But like, they kind of created a genre within a genre, because there would never have been the whole Southern hardcore movement with like Maiden and the Sons of Disaster. Those early songs sound like At the Gates. You know what I mean? Just like a little more down tempo, but like the marriage of blues, metal, and also hardcore like wouldn't have happened if it weren't. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, like for me, it was the band that I was like, whoa, like. Left Hand Path, Entombed, great. But when they did Wolverine Blues and Uprising, I was like, holy shit, this is it. Yeah. You know, I was like, these are the riffs that I like. I was like, this is sick.
Oh, that's so fun, man. I love talking about this shit. Like, who talks about At the Gates? You know what I mean?
Well, I think a lot of people do, judging by how many people were at their shows recently.
But, because they're playing shows again now, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I've got to.
Yeah, because I saw him at the Wiltern too on that Converge run. It's the Wiltern here. I don't know if you've ever been to the Wiltern in Los Angeles, but yeah, it's like 3,000 cap rooms, so it was packed. So at least metal's alive in Los Angeles. So
that is true.
So you're growing up in Syracuse. You get all these tapes from, an unfortunate car collision. You start going. So, did you start going to shows after that, or?
Yeah. So here's another kind of strange one. My mom is kind of in a cult, so like, she's like,
I'm just gonna lay this out here, casual, like.
Yeah. So that's kind of weird. So, I was emancipated at 14 because of that situation. But, I think it kind of gave me more of a reason to fall in love with like mean, evil sounding music. Cause like she was so overbearing with the weird, like snake handling and demonic possession bullshit that it like totally sent me the other way. Like, okay, yeah. Like, that's not how this really is. Yeah. So,
it's like, I like pictures of snakes, not actual snakes.
Like, different vibe altogether here, But yeah, I got really lucky, hardcore at the time in the late, mid to late 90s. The epicenter of it was Syracuse because of Earth Crisis and the straight edge movement and the vegan movement, which is weird because there's no reason to ever go to Syracuse. Like,
I can't tell you how many shows I've been to at Lost Horizon.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, and those guys from Syracuse, like, I became friends with as we started playing and as we started going to shows. But yeah, for a while it was like Syracuse, Erie, Buffalo. Those three cities were having like shows all the time. So we'd come out. I'm from Chicago originally, so we'd come from Chicago, hit up, like that whole area, and just like go to all the shows.
One thing that really I think helped at the time, when I was a kid, from 12 until I moved away, there's a guy that was living in Syracuse named John McCaig. And he was, I guess, the professor of some sort of arts at Syracuse University.
Yeah. I know John really well. Yeah.
He's amazing, and he's a beautiful activist, an amazing human. But what he did differently than anyone else is he started booking Sunday hardcore matinees. So the show would start at like fucking 1 p.m. You'd be home for school night. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like you're waiting until midnight to see some band on a school night. So it really made it accessible for younger kids to get into hardcore. I think he had the luxury of so many hardcore bands. One King Down was in Albany. That's a couple of hours away. Buried Alive was in Buffalo. It's a couple hours. So, we really had this, beautiful scene, where lots and lots of bands could come and play. And do it kind of often, There was almost a show every Sunday. So it's like before MySpace, before the internet, before any of that shit, you could literally go to like Lost Horizon on a Sunday and there would be, you know, a show. So it's like,
Yeah.
I found, you know, so many hardcore bands that I've never heard in my life, you know, but like, and so many that will just pop in my mind as an adult, like, oh yeah, whatever happened to that band, Kill the Slave Master or Maharaj, or like bands that you just, you know, might have seen once and they broke up, like Race Trader or something, you know?
We just had to talk to
Dan.
With Dan from Race Trader, who's like I grew up with basically.
No shit.
Yeah,
I love
so
that band.
So him and I were always in bands like that would play together, you know, and then like later on we played in a couple bands together. But we had Dan on, and then we had Mellinger from Zao, who was talking about Paul from who played in Creation and Crucifixion, who also played in Kill the Slave Master.
Yeah.
So that came up last time we were talking.
Scott Mellinger is like A+ dude, man. He's such a sweetheart. I love that guy. And they just don't stop putting. What have they been a band like fucking 30 years? Like,
it's crazy. Like,
it's
I mean, they took like a 5, maybe a couple year break, but
right. And they've had considerable lineup changes, but I think any band that's been a band for 30 years, unless you're the fucking Rolling Stones, that's happening.
Yeah. So, did you start like looking at that time when you were like seeing these bands? Were you like studying kind of the gear that they had? Because yeah.
Big time. So my best friend at the time, this dude Eric Signer, who is an amazing human. He's still a great guitar. He still plays. He's an awesome guitar player. But you know, when we first got into hardcore, we both kind of played guitar and took lessons and stuff. And so that was like, okay, what is this guy playing? And like, how do you get that tone? And you know, really, Andy from Every Time I Die was the guy that kind of set me on the because he always ran an 800, which is a pretty, you know, especially in the mid 90s, that was about as high gain as you could get outside of a 5150. But he would put a tube screamer in front of it, you know, almost like a clean boost, but just to wake it up. And it was like, okay, that's what's up. You know what I mean? Like, that is a tone, right?
No, because like a lot of people were using 800s, but you got a good crunch out of it, but you didn't get that like 5150. You needed that kind of like punch to it. Yeah, exactly.
To this day, I mean, one of my favorite amp combinations is an 800 with a 5150, because the 800 has that beautiful mid-range honk that you don't
it's so good, so good.
Yeah. And you know, on its own, it's okay. I mean, it's a great rock and roll amp.
Yeah.
But man, added to a very high gain amp, it really kind of
I was surprised because we just had Mike Hickey on, who played on, like, he's Joe Bonamassa's guitar tech now, but he did the Carcass Heartwork tour. He played guitar and was talking through like what the tone was, and it was like he was running 5150 and it was actually a JCM 900, but really it was kind of just saying like anything of the Marshall realm as like the other amp really kind of made that sound. It was like, I was kind of blown away to think, because we've talked about it a couple of times, like the 5150, I never really, like, I knew it was Eddie's amp, but never really put it together with so many of those bands, like all of the Swedish bands, like, like, and now Carcass, and like all of these bands that I assumed it was something else. I didn't know what it was, but
it's really funny because, you know, it's Eddie Van Halen's signature amp, so you would associate like the brown sound, I guess, with Van Halen, but really it kind of took off and became its own thing. You know, I feel like guys that are into, you know, 80s metal, like, you know, like Van Halen today would probably fucking hate a 5150.
That's what I was thinking.
They'd have the presence on 3 and the gain down to like 2 or something. It's like,
yeah, that was the first like high gain head that I played, because I used to do like in the 90s when I was in like other bands, I played it like rack gear. So I had a Digitech 2101, I had a power amp, and it just sounded like, you know, the whole time. And then I remember there was the first practice with Hope Conspiracy. We weren't even a band yet. We were practicing in Minnesota. I don't know if you remember that band Harvest.
Harvest, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a guy from So there's a guy from Harvest, and they had the 4 of us started the band, started HopeCon, but we weren't a band yet. We started practicing, and I show up with my gear, the 2101, all that stuff. And they're like, no, you got to get rid of that. And then we went to like the local like music like kind of like resale shop, and they're like, he's like, I got like a coupon for $150 off we're gonna get you a new amp. So, and that was a 5150 that I got, like, original one, for $300. And it is
crazy. Like
it's
the
incredible.
Blockbutters go for like fucking $3 grand now. It's like, come on, man. It's insane.
Oh my god.
It was also, but yeah, that was my first real amp. Like when I first started playing in bands when I was like, 13 and 14, 15,
Yeah.
I had bought a crate from some dude.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, me too. Yeah.
God, Jesus, that thing sounded so bad. But like, it wasn't long before it was like, okay, I need to get a real amp. And so I bought a 5150 for I think $300.
Yeah.
From some dude in Buffalo, a guy I worked with who was cooler and older than me and had a car was like, yeah, I'll fucking drive you to Buffalo to go get this amp.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Man, so where did you go to? What was it, House of Guitars?
Oh, that's in Rochester, and it's
That's
awesome.
in
Rochester. I'm sorry, not Buffalo.
No, actually, I can't remember what it was how I even found it at the time. I want to say a friend knew that a guy was selling an amp because there was no Craigslist or anything, or anything like that, But yeah, we drove to Grand Island, which is like right outside of Buffalo, like on the Canadian border. And I didn't even fucking plug it in or play it. I was just like, cool, real amp, awesome. I didn't know,
Does it turn on? Don't worry about it.
It'll be fine. Yeah.
I see some tubes in there.
that amp is great. It's a workhorse too.
Yeah, I mean, especially the originals, they're a one-trick pony, but the trick that they do is often all that you need, Yeah. Don't fix what ain't broken. I mean, it's funny how far that amp has gotten. Like, currently, I think there are like fucking 3 manufacturers making it because PV switched it to 6505. It's still the same amp.
Yeah.
EVH makes them. Fender made them. It's like
okay.
All these versions you can still buy, and it's crazy to me. Like, it hasn't changed a whole lot. Like, it still sounds like it. The EL34 version is cool for a different flavor, but it sounds like 50,
So when you were starting, so like 13, 14, like what kind were you? Was it like hardcore bands that you were starting, like, or what was the flavor that you were starting out
bands,
with?
Yeah. At that age, you're kind of a noob. You don't really know what's going on. But all I knew is that I thought Vision of Disorder was the coolest fucking band that had ever been. And I wanted whatever I was doing to sound just like fucking Vision of Disorder, right?
Dude, what's the first song off of the the first Roadrunner record? God, I can't remember. I mean, the production on that, because that really stood out. Like it was like that song stood out, and definitely like they were playing in DC like every other weekend. It seemed like, and it was just like also pre-YouTube and internet, so like trading VHSs, and I remember. It was like a matinee at the Capitol Ballroom in DC, and it was just a sea of kids going nuts when they played. I actually made a playlist of all, like, and I think Garage did too, of just like all the like mid-90s hardcore. And it's like that song, I think, still stands. It's funny playing the game of like, is it nostalgia or it actually a good song? Like trying to separate the two.
And it's not always good. Sometimes you listen back to like shit from that era and be like, what was I thinking? This This
did not stand up. Yeah.
It's so funny.
It's tough to separate the two, but I think Vision of Disorder, at least on like the hits, were like. I'm like, this still kind of slaps.
Yeah, man.
Not the only one. There's a lot of people.
Dude, Roadrunner was like probably, I was just talking to Will Yip about this the other day because I did a rig rundown with End, who, if anyone's listening to this and hasn't heard that, it's the heaviest fucking thing I've ever heard, and I love it. But when we were growing up, hardcore sounded like dick because it was recorded on like 4-channel Tascams and shit. Like, that's what my first bands were. And even like bands that you love, like I love Indecision. I have an Indecision tattoo, but like their records sound like shit. You know what I mean? It wasn't until the early stuff, just Destroy the Machine started sounding good, but everything before that, before Earth Crisis, when they were Framework and stuff, it's unlistenable because the production is so bad, you know.
Yeah,
so
I mean, like, who else is it? Like, even like bands who were like, you know, these guys are players, like Bloodlet. You're like, oh, this is the worst recording ever.
Totally.
Yeah. But
I
that's
think,
what you had, you know. It's
I
like,
think that's one of major, you know, metal's major contributions to hardcore is because, you know, when metal labels, you know, Roadrunner and started kind of noticing hardcore bands and signing Killswitch and Blood Has Been Shed and all these bands, it's like they really took hardcore from a thing, you know, that was kind of rooted in the DC, fuck it, whatever it sounds like is fine, to like, no, actually, we can make this sound really, really cool, you know. And then for whatever reason, I don't know if you guys remember, but in the maybe the late 90s, Nuclear Blast went on this like signing spree of hardcore bands. Like they were just signing. Yeah, it was the weirdest thing. They kept signing everybody. It was like,
I think they were like back doing a bunch of stuff too. I was like, oh, this is on Nuclear, like Comeback Kid, I think is like on Nuclear Blast or something like that.
We Darkest Hour actually talked to them back, like when we ended up signing to Victory. Like that was like one of the labels that we were talking to, and it was, but it was still like I at the time, like there wasn't really any hardcore bands, you know, because this was like 98, 99, somewhere in there, and like it still seemed very separate, like, and like a lot of the cities where, you know, it was predominantly metal crowds and you didn't really have the crossover of punk and hardcore, and like, you know, the scenes weren't mixing, like it was big enough to support, you know, kind of this splintered, you know, scene. Like metalheads were like not really sure what to do with like, where's your long hair?
Like, well, speaking, but Perry, you're saying like recording and stuff, like, you know, all these bands like starting to get better recording. There's one studio and 2 records that sound incredible, and they were done around the same time at this recording studio in Rhode Island called Normandy Sound. And that Judge Bring It Down record on Revelation and Agnostic Front's One Voice, and I think that was on Profile. Man, both those records are 2 of my favorite records, and they sound incredible for that time. Like just thundering drums and tons of reverb. You're like, I don't know what this dude like is doing for that time, but he captured it like really good.
I'm sure you guys remember being, you know, back then and like going into the studio and trying to explain to some engineer that's never fucking heard hardcore, like, no, I kind of want it to sound like this, and they're like,
yeah.
And it's like, but yeah, I mean, it was like nearly impossible, you know, back then, unless the engineer just happened to be into hardcore, which was a rare thing back then. Because it wasn't like today, like where everyone can get at home recording gear and get fucking, you know, SLT tone plugins and, you know, like, that shit didn't exist for us. You know what I mean? It was like DOD pedals if you could get your hands on one. You know what I mean?
I mean, I think the first band I recorded, and we recorded to ADAT. Yeah, and that's what a lot of people. That was like I was like, not even reel to reel because it's too expensive. We had to record to ADAT. You know?
Yeah, that's so funny, man. Yeah, but it's, you know, I feel like with production getting amazing, it's really made hardcore a lot more accessible, which is why you see bands like Turnstile playing fucking Jimmy Fallon and Coachella. You know what I mean? It's like, it's kind of awesome in a way. You know, I remember growing up, like, hardcore kids kind of hated metal dudes and punk and oi punks and like kind of shunned them. And at a time when hardcore was all about unity this and unity that, like everyone was shit on anybody that wasn't like that.
I know, totally.
Unity with everyone that looks like me.
Totally. And now it's a little more homogenized, but in a really cool way. I think, you know, kids today that are getting into heavy music have it so good because it's like,
there's like so many bands that sound different that could play together, you know. It wasn't like that, like it should have. It was like that when I first got into like punk and hardcore, but then like towards like the late 90s, mid 90s to out, it was just like, no, if you're like a Boston hardcore band, you're playing with that, you know, you're like, you're not, you know, like you already have that sound. Yeah,
it's funny how regions had their own thing going on, you know, like a hardcore band from even then from the Midwest would be what sounds like Elliot to us. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
It's a hardcore band, kind of. It's hardcore dudes in a band, but it's just a totally different thing, you know?
Yeah, like the Midwest sound everyone talks about. And it's like, I'm from the Midwest. And everyone's like, oh, yeah, like Braid, Captain Jazz. And, you know, I was like, oh, yeah, I grew up in the same town with those dudes, but never listened to those bands.
Yeah, well,
you know?
I think there was definitely like, and this kind of goes back to like when we were talking to Mike Schleibaum, like talking about how punk isn't necessarily a sound, it's a community, and it's kind of like whatever, like, and that was how like early on we were able to tour and get shows, was like, you know, it's like there's like, you just go to whoever does shows in whatever city,
town,
and it's just like when you go through that route, you could be playing with who knows. Like, I mean, we did shows with Braid, like, you know, Braid started out like,
I think that practice
like, that wasn't weird.
I think that is kind of coming back, you know. I loved that about, like, you know, growing up when we did, it was like, fuck, you would see like the Get Up Kids with Coalesce, you know, like,
we had
you know, same members, but it went way beyond that. You know, there would be like the most chill, sleepy ass emo band ever, the Rocking Horse Winter, and they're playing with fucking Converge or something, and it's like, okay, cool, we're all into this, fine, you know. And that went away hard for a while, but I really do see it coming back. Like, I just saw that Knock Loose tour, and they had Movements out with them, and that was awesome. And, you know, Kubla Khan, which is a totally different kind of hardcore. So I think you do kind of see punk and metal and hardcore kind of coming back into this, like, okay, cool, it's still alt, it's still different, you know.
We're still like, you know, trying to be as counterculture as much as we can with the internet and all that stuff. Which is cool.
Yeah, I think it's great. And another thing I think is great is that kids today don't have to deal with like crews. You know, like, oh, you said something about somebody, we're gonna fucking stab you? Like,
we were talking about that with Scott. You know, it's just like, do riots still happen at
and then it's funny because Scott was talking about that there was he's like, yeah, we played a show's right. I was like, I was at that show. It was 96 in Cleveland.
So in your journey, like you started in your bands in like 13, 14. Were you getting plugged into like Syracuse like shows, like what was like your first show and like getting into everything?
Oh yeah, so we kind of got off topic there. So my mom is in a cult, and all right, so I've heard my mom cuss, I think, one time. And this time was when I was, I think, 13 or so, 12, 13, 14 maybe. But Hellfest used to be in, you know, before Hellfest was like a really big thing in Syracuse.
Yeah.
It was in this little town called Auburn, New York, this particular weekend at like the 4-H club or some shit like that. And Turmoil was playing, and I had a Turmoil like demo. So I'm like, okay, I have to find a way to go to this, you know? And so I tell my mom I'm spending the night with my buddy, Thad Jackson, who played in If Hope Dies and a couple other hardcore bands. And so I'm watching Turmoil, you know? And here comes my mom and my crazy stepdad to literally pull me out of this hardcore show. And they were like dragging me through the parking lot, like, it's called what? Fucking Hellfest! Like, my mom was losing her mind, you know? And to this woman, you know, I'm in this situation where it's like, I'm just worshiping Satan, and, you know, there's kids that are doing kung fu and wildly flailing around, and there are vegans fucking everywhere, and a PETA distro. She, like, couldn't have been any more disappointed. Like, I remember I was grounded, I think, until I was emancipated after that. Like, I got in deep shit, real deep shit over that one.
Wow.
Yeah. I had seen the Deftones a couple months earlier because I lied and said, oh yeah, you know, I got a babysitting gig for a friend, so I'm gonna go do that. And like, our buddy's mom drove us all to see the Deftones at the Lost Horizon, actually. You know? So yeah, like, you know, I think her reticence to let me listen to secular music, let alone stuff that I really love to listen to, was probably like why in my brain I just doubled down on, I want to hear heavier, faster, angrier, more pissed music, you know. I don't think people that are not involved with it don't understand the catharsis, you know what I mean? Like, they don't get why it's fucking awesome. To them it's like, why? Well, it's lovely, honey, but why is he screaming?
Yeah. No, it's cathartic, and it's like it's therapy for it was therapy for me, where therapy wasn't seen as something that I could do. You know, it was like kind of frowned upon. There was no like positivity of like dealing with mental health. So you're like, I'm gonna go see this band that is going to fucking just explode, you know? And like you said, Turmoil, it's like they're still one of my favorite bands. And I saw them in the show was in a loft at my friend's house in Chicago, and it was Damnation AD, Turmoil, and Hatebreed, right on Perfection Desire. Maybe 80 kids, and the place went ballistic. It was just like explosion. One of the best shows I can remember, right? And it's just like that sort of energy that comes off is like, yeah, that's what for me, punk and hardcore was that release, because I just didn't have that at home, you know? I mean, I grew up in my family was great. I didn't have any issues with that, but it was like, I still had a lot of stuff that was on being a first generation kid, you know, of like immigrant parents, and, you know, but you're right. It's cathartic. Everyone's like, why are they screaming? And it's like, well, I don't know, but I love it. You know? You're like,
Yeah. I know, it's like so hard. I'm also a first generation. My mom's whole family's from Poland. So like beyond the cultural oddness of hardcore for somebody on the outside, you have like the double cultural weirdness where it's like, what is this? What the fuck is this? Like they just don't get what's going on, you know? I remember, oh my God, this is so funny. How I found Turmoil is because I think Trustkill Records used to do like comps, you know?
oh yeah.
And when the internet very first came out, my aunt and her husband Stanislaw had a gateway computer. It was like the
Gateway
first
computer.
download songs. And so my uncle downloaded this fucking Trustkill sampler for me over like a weekend, you know, and when it all finally downloaded, the first song was Turmoil. He's like, yeah, let's check this out. Click, click. What the fuck? He was like, whoa.
Yeah.
What did I just do?
That still is one of the best openings of a fucking record ever.
It rips, dude. It rips so fucking hard. But I just remember, like, I didn't know what to expect because I knew that I loved hardcore and I had heard a couple of bands on there, but I didn't know what was happening, and neither did he. And it was just like, if you ever tell your mom, like, I'm so you know? So yeah, I kept that one in my locker at school so she wouldn't find it, you know.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I played in some shitty local bands, and the older I got, I ended up playing in do you guys know Tom Ranger?
I know Tom.
Yeah, Tom's awesome. I played in a band with Tom called Trouble Loves Me briefly.
Oh, you were in that band? I remember that. Yeah.
Very, very briefly. I played a tour or two with them, and then got an offer to play in some bands in Nashville, and that was like, I love Trouble Loves Me. It was like a punk kind of thing, and I also, I'm obsessed with Morrissey. At the time, it was like, okay, cool, this is fucking awesome. So we did that, and ended up playing in the South, and I'm like, oh, I think I like it down here, because at the time I kind of thought that hardcore was relegated to like New York City, and then Syracuse, and maybe like Chicago and Erie, and I had no idea that it existed in other places. We play in the South, and I'm like, oh fuck, like Atlanta has like the biggest, best hardcore scene of all of the country, and it's like, that's when I was like, holy shit, okay, I can leave this cold, miserable, dark place and live someplace with a warm climate and also find hardcore, So the first day I lived in Nashville, I met, Hunter Weeks from Love Is Red, and, he's got a new band that's great. And I ended up playing in that band later on, but I was straight edge at the time and joined this band called Trader, which was like me, and then Adam, who played in like Betrayed, and Roger from Sinking Ships and Love Is Red. Yeah, little Raj. He plays at Trial now. Yeah, so there was like this thing happening in the South. And then also, like, in the North at the time, hardcore was just very, very aggressive and mad and angry. And so I got introduced to like kind of beautiful, like melodic style hardcore. Because the South has always been more punk influenced hardcore than metal, I would say. Where the Northeast, the Northeast is definitely more metal influenced. And it makes sense. I mean, if you go to fucking, Oslo, Norway, or, Stockholm, Sweden, it's cold and dark, and people are pissed the fuck off. You know what I mean? But if you're like in Florida. Of course, Poison the Well came from Florida because it's a beautiful place to live. You know what I mean?
Well, like for me going down, like growing up in Chicago, we'd always go down to like Indianapolis, Louisville, like around there, and like the bands around there were like Endpoint, Elliott, like Falling Forward, like, and they were all like like people would see them as emo bands right now, you know. But they weren't like this tough guy. That's how when someone's like, "Oh," I'm like, "Where's Knock Loose from?" And they're like, "Louisville, Kentucky." I'm like, "Get the fuck out of here,"
Yeah, totally.
And they are. And I was like, interesting because Louisville has always had an awesome scene. I have some really close friends with a lot of bands down there, and it was really interesting to see this like really heavy band coming out of like Kentucky, which is great, but it was just really weird. Like you were saying,
it's kind of like not even Louisville. They're from like Oldham County, Kentucky, which is like
like Covington or something.
What are you guys doing playing 7-string guitars? Because like, this makes no sense. Like I guarantee you, I got $50 right now that says one of those kids plays a mean fucking banjo. Like I promise you. So Oldham County is kind of in the cut, you know what I mean? It's not, and that has to do with like I think like back to our whole point of like metal kind of making hardcore a little more accessible, for people. It was rare to find hardcore outside of big cities in the South, and even then, like I guess Louisville, I would always Louisville had Crazy Fest. You remember that?
Yeah,
that was the bomb, dude. Like AFI and like fucking Thursday and Elliott and the drummer
like really good shows.
Dude, it was so fun. And it was like on this riverfront park that was amazing. Like I wish they would bring that back. I mean, if Birmingham's gonna do Furnace Fest again, I think
that's what I was saying. I was like,
Louisville needs to step it up.
Are you in Nashville still, Perry? Or?
Yeah, I live in Nashville.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I think like because majority like at high school and then a little bit through, or I guess off and on through college, like I was based in Richmond, so it was like
you guys the same thing.
A Vail,
a Vail was my gateway into like the Richmond music scene, but I feel like it's far enough north that it was cold enough because you got Gwar, you've got a Vail, and then there was a lot of heroin too, so like that. So there's like Buzz Oven and
the Clutch,
like like there was definitely some metal tinge in there, but it was all under the context of the punk scene. Like all the bands played together and like shared members, and like it's like we've talked about it before, but it was just like Gwar was kind of who taught everyone how to like do independent tours and be like get in a van and go out and play shows, and like that community like spawned so many different like that trickle down. It was just like Municipal Waste, like Strike Anywhere, Darkest Hour, like all these bands.
I think at that time you're like, oh, Gwar, because they always wore like their makeup and stuff, but apparently they were a revolving door of members, and it was like members from like bands that you'd be like, what? The person from this band played guitar in that band for a while. Like, my friend Zach, who plays guitar in Rise Against, played in Gwar for a little bit before he was.
Right. And his brother plays in the Toadies.
Yeah, his brother plays in the Toadies.
What?
Yeah.
Dude,
yeah.
I love the Toadies. Toadies are great.
I mean, he's a Toadies fan.
Yeah.
Man, you were just mentioning like, independent tours. Like, do you guys like this thought just came to my mind? Like, how fucking reckless were we getting in some shitty old van with MapQuest directions? Like, probably didn't have insurance. I know most tours I went on when I was like 19, 20, 21, we didn't have fucking insurance, like, at all, Like,
I don't think it was required by law yet for some of the stuff we did, but I remember us booking tours with, I don't know if you remember the dialers? Because no one had money, so we'd like, it was like a dialer that someone built where it'd make like the noise it'd make when you put
noises,
make the coin noise. So you put it up to a payphone and you like it'll click, and we would just book tours from like the payphone across the street.
That's so funny. Yeah, book your own fucking life. Like
yeah. It was like shit like that. I mean, that's like stuff that you can't like relive now just because of technology, but it definitely humbles you, kind of that experience.
God, we were just raw talking it, like going on tour with no cell phone. Hey, mom, dad.
Oh yeah, later.
See you in 3 months, I guess, maybe. Like that's
I mean, yeah, it's like I think I called home maybe once a month. I was like, where are you? I'm like, I'm at the Hoover Dam. Like,
I was
like,
I'm alive.
I called home. I was like, I haven't, because like after I graduated college and quit my job and just went out full time, like we were gone for like 6 straight months, and it was just like, I remember calling home, and it was at the Hoover Dam, and I was just like, oh yeah, we're not going to be home for a long time, but we're going to be on ESPN hosting X-Tracks if you want to tune in. That was like the first time I think my parents like thought like this is even like remotely legit, was that like they would see shows and stuff, and it was maybe a slightly tempered response to your mom's, but it was just like, what is this? Like, there is like this, everybody's yelling, like this isn't music, like
My dad still to this day is like, you know what, I support you, but what are you doing? Is this what you've been doing for the past like 30 years?
Dude, my dad came and saw me play once, and it was the funniest fucking thing ever. We were on dude, he doesn't know what's going on. Like, he likes metal, but he thinks metal is like Dokken. You know what I mean? So he's like,
yeah.
Okay, cool. And Love Is Red, we were out with Hatebreed. And on this one particular show, we were playing some huge fest at a skate park in Rochester. And my dad lived in New York at the time. So he's like, yeah, I'll drive up and see your band play. And I'm like, awesome, because I hadn't seen my dad in years at the time. And so we are like loading our gear on the stage, and my old man dad goes and stands like right in the middle of this mosh pit, like looking around, and I'm like from the stage, like, get the fuck out of there, dude. What are you doing? Like, the second we like hit a note, he's like, what the I mean, there was just like all out war, And I see him like, okay, I'm out of my element here. I need to get the fuck out of here. And then
that is fucking funny.
Like the first thing he says to me, like at the van, we're loading our gear out, and my dad's like, "The fuck was that?" He's like, "That was like a fucking Bruce Lee movie."
Bruce Lee movie. It seemed like a prime spot. No one was standing there. Like,
I wonder why.
This is great.
Figure out why there was a big circle, like, and nobody's standing right in the middle.
That's so funny.
I'm just so grateful he didn't get knocked out or something, because like, oh god.
When you were like started playing in the bands, and like so on that tour, like what was your like gear? Like what was your like a go-to amp that you were playing on those tours?
Back then, probably a 5150. 5150, and I had a couple different cabs. It's funny how like, especially when you're on tour, like sometimes gear will get real cool. Like, oh man, all the dudes in Glass Eater are playing a 900. We got to get 900s.
Yeah.
Like, or whatever. Like, Hatebreed at the time were playing this fucking awful like Marshall, but like fake tube, like valve tube tronics or some sort of weird thing where it was like MDF amps or something like that, and they're huge, big, oversized cabs.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
It was like years before modeling, but it was kind of like solid. I think they were solid.
Trying to.
Yeah,
and it just didn't sound, great.
No.
But yeah, I would always run at that time a 5150, and then Love Is Red, we had a backup Mesa triple rec, I think.
Okay.
Which are cool amps, like that was what we had for high gain at the time, I think.
Yeah.
I've heard triple rec sound awesome. I've never owned one that sounded awesome. You know what I mean? They're kind of hit or miss. Like, you know, some amps are just like that. But later on, I started doing this band called Ill Patriot, and that's when I got really into gear. And so I was running like a Softtech MiG 100H with a 50.
It's been a couple episodes since that's come up, but yeah, that's kind of like the big sleeper of that era. Like,
Softtech MiG 100 and the 50, dude, the little one. Oh man, that thing's so sick.
And a lot of people, even if they know about the MiG 100, there was, a short run of them made that were the MiG 100H, which is the high gain one.
Yeah.
Unlike, and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I remember like a 5150 has 5 preamp tubes, which is why it has such a rad, gain tone. but the Softtech was kind of like a Marshall copy, so it had like 4 12AX7s, but with the H, it had some sort of circuit that would like cascade your gain stage, and so it was really kind of one of the first 800 style amps that would really fucking rip your nuts off.
Push it,
yeah, totally. And
yeah, those amps sound so good.
Yeah, they were problematic because they were plastic. Like the jacks would break off and shit, and like all kinds of trouble. But I stopped doing it. So I'm narcoleptic. Do you guys know what that is?
Yeah. Fall asleep, whatever.
I have a neurological condition where I fall asleep, and it's happened on stage. That old band Trader, and that's when I was like, okay, I need to rethink my gear situation, because I used to run my cable like not only through my guitar strap, but through the handle on my head, just so it wouldn't kick out and all that shit. When we're playing with this band, Joe Hardcore.
Yeah.
So he used to do this band called Punishment.
Yep, I'm from Philly, right?
And we were on tour with Punishment and playing in Jacksonville, Florida, I think. Well, it was
which is sketchy.
Yeah, that's sketchy enough, And I had a sleep attack on playing that show, and I fucking fell off the stage, and my amp and cab and everything came with me and fell on top of me because my cable was like tied into the fucking amp.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it was a whole thing, man.
That's gnarly.
Yeah,
so did you go to like custom amps because they're like pillowed?
Oh, dude, some of those custom amps are sleepers, bro. Those can be really cool sounding.
I've actually never played through it, but I remember like
I thought they were just bass heads. I didn't know they made guitar amps.
Yeah, they did actually. Yeah.
Okay. There was a pawn shop that for years I would go to we'd go on vacation to like Nags Head, North Carolina, and they just had like for years no one bought it. It was like these late 70s Ibanez Artist Series guitars in there, and it was all cheap as shit. It was like $500 each for like these Artist Series guitars, and then they had just like a whole room of like custom amps, like vintage. And I was just like, and I go in there and just look at it, like I should have bought one.
Yeah, it's funny how common those used to be in local music shops. Like everybody's local music shop had nothing but custom amps. It's really weird because I think they like kind of started making PA amps. They were like the big fucking
you're right.
Yeah. And then they made bass amps, and then Custom and Trainer, if you remember that company, Trainer.
Oh yeah.
They were kind of like making Fender copy amps, but like if you find one of those old customs and it's in good shape, perfect pedal platform, like insane good sound.
Yeah.
I
use
a massive win,
Yeah, I use like a couple of us like back in Boston too all have got trainers, like probably and we were using, and I've used them on recordings. I've definitely used a trainer. I believe I used a trainer and a Bad Cat together on a HopeCon recording at God City. Yeah, so like I got a trainer, and it is a great platform for pedals. But it's basically, it's like a 800. You get the 2, it's loud, and then you just crank it, then it's just like, that's where it starts to break up. You're like, oh shit, they're great amps. If you can get an old trainer.
Yeah, trainers are great. Yeah, I love those amps. That was always kind of like, well, I played a bunch of emo bands too, but the trainer was always kind of considered like a poor man's Fender, because you could get it relatively cheap, but they were basically the same circuits, a lot of them.
I got mine for like $400, and that was like 10 years ago.
Totally. You used to be able to get those like anywhere, $300, $200.
Yeah. Great.
Right before the pandemic, I actually saw a trainer in Highland Park here in Los Angeles. There was one. It had a 612 and it was a 60-watt head with it, and the combo was like $750 or something. It's gone.
I mean, reverb, man, it's like everything. But you're talking about those Softtechs. Electro Harmonics started making that Softtech, basically redoing it. It's basically the same amp, just new under Electro Harmonics for like $600.
Yeah, and they're made well. They're actually
they're made really well. People said that they're
Dude, EHX kind of like just has it dialed in, man.
I think so too. Yeah.
You got to realize like Mike was kind of like one of the first fucking dudes to ever make a pedal. You know what I mean? Like.
Oh yeah.
That dude gave pedals to like Jimi Hendrix. I'm pretty sure. Like he's been around. You know what I mean? Yeah. that dude had a little knowledge of, electrical engineering at like 20 and a whole pocket full of acid and like changed the fucking world. Like,
you don't think about it. Yeah, he's the one probably came up with like all these pedals that, Hendrix for sure, and all these like legendary dudes were playing at the time.
I think some of the very first effects ever created, of course there was like, a fuzz, in the 70s you could get a fuzz face and maybe a Ross compressor if you were in a country band or something, but they didn't really make, outside of delay pedals, no one made anything like that,
Yeah.
Really, EHX was like kind of I think Mike was kind of like the dude that was like, okay, how far can we take this? Like,
so is that the Big Muff would have been the first electro harmonics pedal, or?
You know what? Let me look that up because I bet you're right. I bet the Big Muff was the very first one.
Because I know that his that delay pedal that he has, what's his name from U2 used to use it. That was like one of his signature sound for
like the Memory Man.
The Memory Man. Yeah. The Edge used to use that.
Like that's how you know this dude was like onto something, because like back then the pedals were like the size of a fucking car. Yeah, I mean, this dude is responsible for the small stone chorus.
Yeah,
like, kind of all that shit.
Wow.
They've made over 150 different effects pedals. Insane. Yeah.
They're still EHX are they owned by themselves or is it Dunlop?
I think I could be totally wrong on this. I think they have the same distributor or something, but EHX is still owned by Mike. Like that's still his company.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Even at like NAMM, they have their own booth and stuff, and it's always one of my favorite booths to go to. I don't know if you guys ever got into the Afghan Wigs. You know that?
Yeah.
So John Skinnick, the guitar player of the Afghan Wigs, is the fucking EHX guy, and like I love Afghan Wigs, so like I'm always like, all right, I got 5 minutes in between sheets.
Yeah, I'm here to punish. Let's go.
It's so funny. But that dude, actually, he loves gear more than anybody I know. So it's always a pleasure running into that guy because he knows the shit. He owns like everything that's ever been made because he's been on tour his whole life. Like he really knows what's up,
That's right.
So like, I guess, I mean, we kind of touched on the question where it's like how you're like, when you're on tour, you kind of look at everyone's gear, who's playing what. Because we used to do that too a bunch, and I was like, oh, so-and-so's playing this, so-and-so's playing that, And for me, it was like watching like Cave-In. Those guys would always experiment with different amps, different pedals, and all that stuff. But then different sounds,
different genres.
Exactly.
Dude, side note, I remember I was just fucking so into Cave-In, and it was like one of the heaviest albums I had ever heard. And so I go all the way to Albany with some friends to go see Cave-In, and I'm like, I'm about to see Until Your Heart Stops live. And they played like nothing but stuff from like Jupiter, and I was like 14, like, what the fuck is this? Like, I was so mad,
Yeah, because that was when they were teasing, because like we did a couple shows with them on that, and they would tease like what's the first song off of Until Your Heart Stops, and then just like cut it out, and then be like, nope, more delay.
It was so funny. Like, all these metal kids and hardcore kids in the pit, just like waiting for something.
They're ready.
Then, like total fake out. Like, okay, never mind, I guess. Which is funny because, like, as an adult, going back to the, when Cave-In really first started getting experimental, that shit is phenomenal. Like,
oh yeah,
oh my god, like,
I mean,
it takes an adult to really appreciate it.
I think
because at the time, all I wanted to do was mosh. Like,
we played a show with them. It was like us, Cave-In, Converge, National Acrobat at CB's. And it was like a killer show, but I remember all these industry people coming out to see Cave-In because Jupiter had just dropped and they were just like the buzz band, and everyone's like, oh, they're going to be the next Nirvana, blah, 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 and we're like, holy shit, and they fucking killed it at CB's, right? Everyone played a great show that night, but you're like, this band is doing something completely different and amazing, like even there was a lot of people curious who was like, like, oh my god, their heavy records are incredible. But then that record came out, you're like, oh my god. And I was like a really big Into Another fan, so I was like, oh, this is awesome.
Totally has that Into Another vibe,
fun fact on the Jupiter record. So like when we Darkest Hour went in and recorded with Brian McTernan, like right as they were wrapping up Jupiter for the what's it Mark of the Judas. Like what's the name of your own record? But they recorded the whole thing live. Like it was there's like a handful of overdubs, but like Steve was singing, playing, like it's like live takes. I was just like,
oh my God.
What? Like,
even to this day, like with Mutoid Man, he's playing like an Aria Pro 2 fucking V, and it's like what? And it sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I couldn't do that.
Well,
like,
what's happening now is like I guess like because like me and there's been a couple of other people too. If you go on Reverb, but those Aria Pros Japanese era like Les Paul customs are like hot right now because no one can afford a custom Black Beauty, a Gibson, because they're like $5,000, and even the new reissues they're making are super expensive. And like the Japanese Aria Pros, there's like Greco and all these other like pseudo companies that are made by these Japanese guys who made them incredible. These companies that made them to spec of Gibson. You know, they're just amazing guitarists still. You know,
dude, some of those lawsuit era guitars play better than
the
actual thing.
Yeah,
they really do. It's wild, man.
So Perry, what's your like? I guess Fred, I think you usually ask this question too, so go for it. The must-have gears of gear.
Well, like so. I think before. I also wanted to ask, like, you know, talking about rig rundown, like how did that like come about? Like, because you know, I think maybe it's a two-part question for you, because like what Niraj was alluding to is kind of like the one piece of gear that you can't live without. But I think, you know, is how I, you know, first got exposure to you was like, you know, seeing bands like, you know, Strike Anywhere showed up on a rig rundown. Like, wait a minute, like this is rad. Like how did that come about?
Man, so all right, kind of a long story, and I'm gonna try to condense this. I'm narcoleptic, you guys know that.
Got that.
So I
may or may not have fallen off of a stage once or twice.
I break a lot of bones because of narcolepsy. And in my late 20s, mid 20s, I broke my right arm, and it was paralyzed. And so the doctors are like, yo, if it doesn't come back in 6 months, like we gotta fucking lose the arm, you know? And I'm like, okay, this blows. And having one arm and being a guitar player is awful. I mean, really bad. So, I mean, dude, I was playing in some big bands at the time, and I was about to join some other hype bands, and like, that's gone. So I'm sitting in my room with a whole fucking wall of gear, and it's like, I guess I'll get into Minus the Bear now and learn tapping, you know, because like it was the only thing I could do with my hand, you know? And like, still to this day, I love Minus the Bear more than anything. But so years go by, like a year and a half, 2 years go by, and I'm like, the arm just atrophied and it got all fucking skinny and weird. And when you can't feel it, instead of like, oh, you're sleeping weird on your arm or you're cutting off the circulation, you can't feel that. So you just get a fucking migraine, and like, you know, you roll over it on, you like, worst headache ever. And I would always like roll over it in my sleep because I couldn't move my arm at all. And so eventually it was like, okay, this is a detriment. Like, this is fucking hurting like my brain, but also it's really weird and like skinny and gross looking. And like, I always had to be in a sling and all this shit. So I was like, finally, I'm like, okay, cut the fucking arm off, you know? So about a month before my scheduled amputation, I woke up in the middle of the night because my arm hurt fucking so bad. It felt like lava was like pouring through my arm. So I called my doctor, you know, and I was like, yo, we got to move this amputation up like as soon as possible. And they're like, why? And I'm like, this shit hurts like fuck. And they're like, what do you mean it hurts? And I'm like, feels like hot lava is pouring through my goddamn arm. Like, you got to get it off now. And they're like, whoa, this is awesome. Like, this is a good sign. When nerve cells regenerate, it hurts like really fucking bad, you know? So sure as shit, like within, you know, about a month, I could wiggle my middle finger. And I was like, if there's any chance I could play guitar again, then fuck it. Like, don't keeping the arm. And just as I could like lift like a can of soda or something, I fell asleep driving, fucking broke it all over again. Re-paralyzed the arm. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So I was a fucking mess, man. Luckily, I had a surgery where they like drilled a hole. Like I'll actually show you guys because this is kind of funny. There's a huge scar that goes down my arm. I don't know if you can see it here.
Oh yeah.
I always hated that scar, so I just got this little airplane tattooed bombing through it. So it looks like.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, but they literally hid the nerve like under a plate, so I can't fuck it up again. But anyway, there was like 4 years where my arm was paralyzed, and so I couldn't tour, and I got really into cameras, and I started working in film, started PAing on music videos and commercials and shit like that. Working on TV shows, worked my way up, and production managed, production coordinated, produced, hated producing. So I got into art department and started art directing music videos and commercials. And then on a whim, I'm like, fuck it, I'll try my hand at directing. And the very first video I ever directed, I got nominated for Video of the Year. And like,
video, that's awesome.
Yeah, all this crazy shit, So it was like, okay, cool. Like that all happened as my arm was kind of like, I could play guitar again, So it's like, fuck it, I guess I'm going to do punk rock. And then when I'm home from tour, I'll do music videos and commercials and stuff. So Premier Guitar, the Rig Rundown was really kind of becoming successful, but they wanted a professional video guy who lived in Nashville because that's where all the tours come through, because Premier Guitar is actually based out of Iowa.
Yeah.
Like, not a whole lot going on.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that either. That's crazy.
Bollinger, the other Rig Rundown guy, the older guy, he's kind of like a dad to me. And I've worked with him since I was like 19. He was the band leader on this TV show I worked on called Nashville Star, which was like American Idol for country music.
Right.
And we worked together for years and years and years. And so he was already writing for Premier Guitar. And they came to him like, hey, we really want to step up our video stuff. Would you want to do videos? Do you know a videographer that also happens to play guitar and can edit? He's like, actually, I do. I know the guy. He just got fucking nominated for Video of the Year. Let me call him,
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And so when Premier Guitar called me, actually, they were like, hey, this is the deal. Are you interested? And I'm like, no, not at all. No, I direct music videos, but thank you for the offer, and they're like, no, like, hear me out. Like, it's a salary position with insurance. And like, that was when I was like, oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. Wait a minute. I could use some of that.
Yeah. It's like, can I still direct like on the side? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. So now I'm in this like fucking awesome situation where like, I don't have to write on every video that comes my way, because in Nashville, it's a lot of really bad pop country, and it's not something I necessarily want to do. So I have this wonderful opportunity, like talking about gear, which I love for a living, but also only directing videos that I really either I love the song or I love the artist, or like, so it just like, it's kind of like this perfect world. I love cameras. Like camera gear to me is just as important as guitar gear. You know what I mean?
That's cool.
So it's like, I have this cool fucking dream job where I get to do both,
Oh man,
that's kick ass, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, and so when I started at Premier Guitar, I was just the videographer, like the editor, and then it kind of, all right, so Bollinger's amazing. The dude is the best musician I've ever known personally, but there are some situations where I can't put him on camera. Like I can't put him on camera with Carrie King. You know what I mean? Or like, you know what I mean? Like, so eventually, Premier, our editor-in-chief, our chief like content guy, the head honcho at Premier Guitar, was kind of like, Perry, you could totally be on camera. Why don't you just like start doing the metal stuff, And I'm like, I don't know if that's for me. I'm kind of the other side of the camera guy. And it just kind of worked out like that. And then once I had done enough, it was like, hardcore is so underrepresented in like the greater world here. And I know more people personally, probably because I'm a hardcore kid, but more people I think get into really taking music seriously because they got into hardcore when they were fucking 12, 13, or 14. Yeah. So it's like,
you're right.
I would be willing to bet that if we start doing some stuff that's not necessarily mainstream, that we'll get a killer response. And wouldn't you fucking know it, there's not a week that goes by that I don't get a message from some like 50-year-old man that's like, Now I hate this music, but like seeing how they use the gear is so interesting to me because, like, you know,
that's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah, some fans of the Rundown watch every single one of them because they just are so interested.
Yeah.
A lot of our audience, they watch it because they love the band, you know. But, you know, I would say the core audience is like dudes that just really, really love gear. So, like, you know, Dave Matthews Band might not be your thing, but you want to see what they're using and how they're using it.
Totally. Yeah.
So,
that's how, like, I think it's awesome that you do like hardcore bands or, like, you know, more like bands that aren't like represented that way, because I mean, when you have a lack of resources, you make the stuff that you have work, and sometimes the stuff that you do works, and everyone's like, I want to sound like that, and you're like, oh well, he recorded that through a fucking crate practice amp with a 57 on, you know, and you're like, really? And everyone's like, yeah. So, you know, just like really cool tricks like that, because you just don't have the resources to get all this like gear, or you have a producer for the thing, you know, whatever it may be.
And the opposite is true too. Like, you know, you'll see, because hardcore is so accessible now, you'll see hardcore bands with a fucking pedal board that's like self-aware, ready to like fly off the planet. Like,
self-aware.
You know what I mean? Some dude, like, his dad was really into Bonamassa, got him into it when he was like 10, so he started playing guitar, and that led him down this path to hardcore or metal or punk or something, you know. I think that's kind of, we all start somewhere, and like, why not cover hardcore bands, especially like, you know, like, for example, maybe a blues artist that's legendary to some people, it might not speak to me, you know what I mean? But like, everyone, like, what makes the Rig Rundown, I think, special is that regardless of what you play, if you play and you spend enough time playing, you're going to try new guitars, you're going to try different gear, you're going to swap out your pickups. You never fucking stop chasing the dragon, and I think that's what's so fun about gear. You know what I mean? Every couple of years, I'll still hear something that I'm like, holy fuck, what is that? You know? Like, remember the first time? Yeah, first time I ever heard of Diesel VH4, I'm like, get the fuck out of here. Are you kidding me? Like, that is a real amp? Like, fuck me. Like, that sounds like a panther pissing razors, and I want it. You know? But it's like, of course, a $4,000.
That panther should get that checked out, but also great tone.
Totally. You know? But I love it. I mean, it's fun seeing like people push the envelope and change things, and like, you know, a 5150 wouldn't exist if there hadn't been somebody fucking cranking an 800 before that. You know?
Yeah, and it's because at that time you're like, oh, Eddie Van Halen uses this. You know, I mean, I love Van Halen, but someone who might not be in Van Halen's like, why would I look at this? I want to play heavy music. I'm not going to look at his amp. But you're like, oh shit, you know, someone took that amp because that's all that was out there and did whatever they needed to make it like a high gain amplifier. You know?
Totally, yeah.
So I think it's like, I mean, for me, someone who started off like not thinking that I would be a musician, like I've gotten to punk because I just wanted to jump around and play fucking fast music, right? I need 3 chords. I was like, here we go. And then I was like, as you were saying, as you start, like, you get that kind of bug and you get that itch, you're like, hey, this is a really good creative outlet for me. But then all the gear starts coming in. You're like, oh, I can sound like this. I can sound like that. I want to sound like this. I want to do this tuning. You know, and it's like, you're right. It's just like, I think that progression, and I think with what you guys do in Premier Guitars, like the Rig Rundown is just like super. I forgot who it was. I think it was ISIS that you guys did a Rig Run, or Sumac when you guys did a Rig Rundown with. And Aaron Turner was talking about his floor setup and stuff. He's like, I don't know. I think I just turned some knobs and stuff. And I was like, really? I thought this dude was like a professor.
Right?
Yeah.
That's another fun thing about the Rig Rundown is like sometimes we'll show up and a guy's like, I don't know, fucking sounds good. Yeah. And then sometimes they're like, oh, well, this particular pedal has a fucking Russian capacitor that was only made between May and fucking June. And it's like, whoa, like that's not the kind of gearhead I am, but there are so many, you know, like
there are. You just get the gamut. I think it's great.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah. It's so funny, man. You get guys that are like on reverb for fucking have notifications set for 2 years for a specific match set of like fucking KT-77s or something. It's like, I appreciate your dedication to the craft.
Yes, you. That's so funny.
So after all, through all of the Rig Rundowns, through all of the bands that you've done, like, You know, what's the one piece of gear that you like can't live without? Like you wouldn't go to a show without. Like it could be anything. Like it could be your pick. It could be a tuner. You know.
Man, that's a tough one. Only because like I play and I'm interested in so many different kinds of music.
Yeah.
You know, shit. Like when my hand came back, when my right arm came back, I got really into flat picking and bluegrass style acoustic music because it was like getting my fucking fingers to work again.
Dexterity back. Yeah. Dude, I'm so jealous. If you know any like tutorial, you know, I want to start learning how to flat pick so bad.
Oh, dude, flat picking. All right, dude. 2 words: Molly Tuttle. Just watch what she does and like try. Dude, Molly Tuttle is one of the sickest flat pickers in the world. You know, and that's kind of, it's funny, like we've been talking about hardcore and punk rock this whole time, but like it goes all directions. Like for example, there's a guy right now that is changing the bluegrass world named Billy Strings. And if you haven't heard Billy Strings, then listen to it because he's a hardcore kid that played in hardcore bands. That's how he got into metal, which is how he got into drum picking and all this shit, which is how he became a fucking living bluegrass legend.
It's so funny. Like I found out about him because he went on tour with Sarah Watkins, who's
he did?
Our the singer in our band that Niraj and I do, God Collider, his wife is Sarah Watkins. And so like, you know, we're all friends and like I see this dude like
the whole bluegrass world,
and he was wearing a death metal shirt. I can't remember, it was like a Cannibal Corpse shirt or something, and I was just like, and he's on tour with Sarah? I'm just like, who is this guy?
He's one of my favorite rundowns that we've done because I knew like going into it, I'm like, you know, he's got a bunch of really traditional tattoos and he's got like giant cat butthole ears. I bet this was a hardcore kid. I bet money. And then sure as shit, like we show up and it's like, oh dude, yeah, fuck yeah, like homies. Like, you know what I mean? It was like one of those things like when you meet a hardcore guy in like Holland, like some dude wearing a fucking shirt. You know, you're gonna love it, you know? It's like, but that's how it was for Billy. And then also he's a bluegrass guy and his pedal board was massive. He's playing lasers and flanges and all this cool shit. And it's like that's why he's making such a splash, I think, in the bluegrass world, because it's so different than
coming in from a different background, because
it's not what people traditionally expect. You know, he's not doing like the old standards. And he's writing songs about getting arrested for meth and weird shit. And it's like, you know, like this guy is amazing. Like,
it's keeping it real.
Yeah. If you want to have your mind blown, like seriously blown, there's a song called Dust in a Baggie. Just it's unbelievable. His solo work, like his flat picking, his playing is just undeniable. And it's cool to see like how obviously influenced by metal, man. It's like metal and hardcore creep their way into popular culture, you know, in a way that's
all the time.
Not always visible, but it's always there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was interesting. I was listening to an interview with Vivian Campbell from like, you know, Dio and Whitesnake and now Def Leppard or whatever, and how he got the gig with Dio, and like he was talking, and like that was something that always stood out to me, like that first Dio record, like how aggressive like the guitar playing was, and like not really overdriven, but just like, you know, precise but like aggressive. And you know, he was talking about like he grew up like one of his main influences was punk. Like he loved the Sex Pistols, like, and just Steve Jones, like how he attacked the string and just like little things like that. And it was just like he didn't understand why Ronnie James Dio would pick this unknown guy, you know, out of, you know, coming from LA where there's like all, you know, a sea of, you know, amazing players. But it's that attitude, it's that aggression, it's that, you know, just like, and this is just one example of like how, you know, coming from that, you know, coming from punk and hardcore and like that, you know, just approach to playing music can totally, you know, revolutionize like any genre, like
any genre. Yeah.
Man, and beyond, you know, even, you know, taste in music, like I'm so fucking grateful that I found hardcore because it has shaped me politically and how I interact with the rest of the world and how I treat people. And like, you know, I think that is so important. Like, especially, you know, if you were in a situation like me where like, you don't, you know, you're emancipated at 14, you don't really have parents, they're kind of fucking crazy. So it's like, man, like my morals, you know, of course, at the time, you know, when I was 15, 16, it was like, okay, I'm straight edge because, you know,
I've seen what happens. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, totally. And then, you know, it evolves from there. But like, you know, it's awesome to see like Beto O'Rourke, like a hardcore dude from fucking Texas, is now running for fucking public. You know, it's like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Holy shit. You know, like it really, really given enough time. And, you know,
it's we had this conversation. Who did we have this conversation with? Was it with what's his name from Zayo?
With Scott or
Scott? We had with Scott. Yeah, we had Scott because Scott was like, you know, we played with all these people like years ago, and you interact with all these people from these different worlds, but everything is brought together by punk or hardcore metal. And then you go off, you kind of do your thing, and all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, that dude who wrote that amazing movie was, you know, so and so and so and so. You know, like he was at this show, or you know, I hear those stories all the time where it's like
the guitarist of Most Precious Blood, right? Indecision is like a fucking like a city councilman in New York City or something. It's like it's like, you know, and it's not just politics. I mean, you know, there's so many authors. Like, you know, I don't know if you ever read any of Wes Iwold's stuff. It's fucking great. Like, you know, like Keith Buckley, I guess, is like, you know,
he's a writer.
I've heard he's a fucking awesome writer. I know he was like some sort of English teacher before.
Yeah.
Trying to do punk rock full time. So it's like,
but then
it's just awesome to see the like beyond everything. I think it all boils down to punk rock ethos. Like,
yeah, that's it is. Yeah, in LA, you have a lot of people within the entertainment industry too. You're just like, oh my god, like this dude who's a exec at here. Oh yeah, I used to go to. Someone came up to me. I think this guy works at Netflix, and he's like, "Hey man, you probably don't remember me, but 20 years ago, I booked Converge and Hope Conspiracy at this small Round Table Pizza, like a shop. It's like a Pizza Hut in Half Moon Bay, San Francisco, like hour south of San Francisco, right in Santa Cruz." And he's like, "I remember there's like maybe 10 kids there, and you guys were playing for. You guys put a hat in the room, and you guys were just playing for whatever, calling out song names." And I was like, "What?" He was like, "Yeah, man, that show was. Everyone remembers that show." I was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah." It became like legendary, even though there was like 10 people there. And he's like, I'm like, "What do you do now?" I was like, "Oh, I'm a showrunner for whatever at Netflix." I was like, "Oh, awesome! You did way better than me."
Dude, it's funny how much I run into it in the entertainment industry because I work.
Yeah.
I was in house at VH1 and CMT for years, and it's like every once in a while, it's like, oh fuck yeah, I'll work with this dude. It's like, I know you from shows, or like, you know, like we totally know each other from around, and it's like, oh, it's comforting. You know?
And there's that immediate connection where you're like, oh, that dude's a punk dude. I know, or woman who I almost got a job working at Fox doing like, what is it? How they do it was like basically mixing levels for translation, for doing like German translations and all this type of stuff, right? And I was like shouting a couple people, and the woman who was there, she's like, yeah, it's a friend of my ex-wife, and she's just like, yeah, oh, I grew up in the punk scene. She's like, I used to play bass for Courtney Love for a while, and then but I knew her through the punk scene, and then like she's just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get you in, see if I can get you, get like, so that's just kind of how like super cool. She's like, oh my god, I totally want to check out your bands, and then I found out that, oh yeah, she played with like Courtney Hall for a long time, like her bass player. I was like, damn, okay. But just like shit like that,
It's interesting, man, because even other places in the world, like you'll meet somebody, and if you have that common love, everybody loves music, everybody listens to music, but there's something different about punk rock and hardcore that makes you passionate about it. Like I know people that are passionately into jazz, but it's nothing like they're not jumping off a fucking stage and walking across 20 people's heads because the lyrics made them feel something, It wasn't like Wayne saying, can we start again? And like, that's not happening anywhere else, And that's why I feel so grateful like that I found it. It's a beautiful thing. And it's like here we are in different parts of the world sitting here having a conversation.
I know, it's like
awesome.
It's right. So I guess the one piece of gear might be the the punk camaraderie, the punk community.
Yeah. I'm sorry to get off topic, but probably.
No,
all right, this is gonna be so.
Yeah, I would take that in. I think that's kind of like the most poetic epic.
Beyond that, this is so lame. But when and I have nicer guitars. I don't know what it is. This I think is one of the first guitars that I just like really like bonded with or whatever. Nothing crazy. It's a Viper 400 with EMGs.
They're great.
It's been around the fucking world with me, and it's most of the life been a backup. But it's like, dude, every single day, like I'm waiting for something to render because I've edited, you know, an hour-long rig rundown. It's like, okay, gotta wait, and it's like I immediately grab the fucking Viper for whatever reason. I used to have a Gibson SG that played like a fucking truck, and Ariel from Glass Eater, I think we were on tour with them, and he's like, "You want to trade?" Which, in retrospect, was probably like the worst fucking idea in the world because that SG is probably worth, you know, like at least $1,000 now.
Yeah.
This isn't, you know, worth shit, but it still plays better than that guitar.
Oh yeah.
Hey, you just get those instruments that you're just like, oh, okay, this is it, you know.
Totally, yeah.
That's incredible. Yeah. Well, Perry, I thank you so much for coming on the show. Like,
thank you for having me.
It's great.
Yeah, this is awesome.
Great getting to peek behind the curtain of Rig Rundown and hear your story. Like that's incredible. I had no idea. That's so cool. Makes me love Rig Rundown that much more. So
more. Yes.
Man, all right. So I guess that means when God Collider starts touring, we can do a Rig Rundown, and you probably owe me Rig Rundowns from 100 other fucking bands that you we can do. As soon as Al ever does a fucking reunion, I will fly there to do a Rig Rundown. I'll pay for it.
Yeah, that would be.
I'm game. I'll let you know for sure.
Yeah, keep me posted about all that.
Well, thanks again, and hopefully we get to cross paths again really soon.
Yeah,
absolutely. Talk to you guys soon.
Thanks, Barry.